All right, we are live. Let me get this tweeted out for everybody here. Good, good, good. So, I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend, and here we are. It is September 29th, tomorrow, September 30th, the last day and the last trading day of September. So, really, really looking forward to that. So, but yeah, I hope everybody had a great weekend. Good time with friends and family. Get to watch some football, have some fun, and so yeah. So, actually, futures start by now. We'll take a look at those in a second. So, but today, in this week, we're going to talk about crucial candles, right? We're going to talk a little bit about price action, right? We've gone over a lot of price action stuff in the past, but sometimes there's those key candles that you look at intraday and you're like, okay, this is important, right? That type of stuff. So today we're going to kind of start that topic. So just as a reminder, everything we're going to talk about today is for educational purposes only and not investment advice. Not investment advice. So please take a moment to review this disclaimer. If you're watching the recording, you can pause the video, just read through it. Okay, and we'll get started here. So yeah, so good stuff. So today we're going to talk about the hammer, right, or the yammer, right? So the hammer. And so anyway, the hammer is an interesting candle, right? So basically, what it is you have a long lower tail and you have a kind of the top 25% usually. It could be anything over like 50%. Any bigger than that, it gets a little bit kind of different, right? A little bit kind of different control. But anything over 50%, generally is okay, right? And you want it to kind of close at the generally show at least the high of that at the top. You can have a green hammer, you can have a red hammer, right? So we'll talk about each of those in a little bit. So basically, just to kind of get things started off, I get this from Bukowski's the pattern site. He's got a lot of great tools. So generally, the hammer right is a reversal pattern, right? Bullish reversal pattern. You come down, right? You come down, and then you have a hammer. It's basically showing that you have an exhaustive move right here, right? So a lot of times, what we like to see on these type of hammers is volume, right? Because what we show is that the bulls, right, basically have won this candle, right, and then it starts to work its way up. So it basically works 60% of the time, is what he's saying. So I mean, it's not a guarantee, right, that it's going to go up after you see one of these, but it is interesting. We'll look at some examples, and sometimes you can kind of increase your edge on those by looking at the price action and kind of seeing what's going on around that, right? Okay. There's another type of hammer that's out there. It's also called the hanging man, right? And so the hanging man is another one, right, where basically the top of the real body, right, the hammer itself is in an uptrend, right? And so what he found is that about 59% of the time, right, it continues the uptrend. A lot of folks, the traditional hanging man, right, is basically like a sign of weakness, right? If you think about a hanging man, it's like, blah, right, it's ready to go back down. And so we'll take a look at that a little bit too, and just kind of show some examples where that actually does go down, and maybe a couple ideas of why we would look at that, right? So it helps to really put these in context. So and then another thing we'll talk about is look to see what's happening on other time frames, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that we covered in our newsletter this weekend too. Okay, so let's take a look at some charts. Before we get started here, this is just a quick look at the monthly chart, and this is good. I'm going to go through this today's charts and just kind of show what's going on with those, and I'm going to point out the hammers, right? So on the monthly chart, right? So what did we have back here in March? We had a hammer month. Now it didn't close fully at the top, right? But it's pretty close. I would still consider this a hammer with like a little bit of a nub on top of it, right? So small upper shadow. Typically these are relatively bullish, right? And so, but it's in a continuation pattern, right? So some might think this is a hanging man, right? Because it's kind of up here in an uptrend, right? So they think it down. So why do we get bullish continuation? Well, one of the things I look at too is where did the bottom shadow go, right? So in this case, in the monthly chart, a lot of times these trends, right? Your moving averages, your Bollinger Bands can be a little bit more potent, right, because it's on a bigger time frame. And so here you can see the lower shadow is right at the mid Bollinger Band, which is your 20 moving average, right, on the monthly chart. And so that, right, is has some bullish implications, right? So what we see here is with the green is that the bulls were in charge. They stayed over 50% of the range, and we got continuation into the next month, right? Now we're kind of in a little bit of a different situation, right? Because last August, right, we did have a hammer, right, but it's a red hammer, right? And so that is a little more hanging manish, right? So it had a little more space above the Bollinger Band, right? It left a little upper shadow here at the upper Bollinger Band, right? Now we're starting to see a little bit of a movement to the downside, right? And a little more bearish kind of sentiment overall. So that is one of the things that we've been seeing. Okay. Next, let's take a look at the weekly chart, right? And so later this week, we'll talk about kind of the reversal hammer, the inverted hammer, things like that, right? Now, this case too, right? We also saw a red hammer here on the weekly and got follow through. We had a green hammer here and got follow through. So why was this hammer, red, why wasn't this considered really hanging manish, right? And then get follow through. Well, one of the reasons, right, is that it was an inside month, it was inside week, right? So inside weeks just so kind of consolidation right here, right? So it's basically it was a pause hammer, right, that got movement to the upside, right? So that's one of the things that we look at. Another thing we look at too, right, is the price action around these levels, right? Unless it forms an outside bar, right, the hammer's likely to break up or down, right? So if it's an outside bar, it goes both ways, right? And so here's an example on the weekly chart of basically a hanging man hammer, right? Now it's a little bit smaller. Some would call this maybe a spinning top, maybe an upper doji, but I think it's hammer enough, right? I think you can jam a nail with that, right? Even with a small nub on top there. So why did this one, kind of break down versus this one? Well, this was not inside, right? It was after a big uptrend, right? And it basically just kind of came back into the upper shadow, kind of gave you a little bit of a clue there. And did the next month, the next week, did it break out over the top of it? No. So what did it do? It broke the bottom of it. That gave him momentum down. What that does is very powerful, right? I call it tail fail, right? So the tail failed to the downside, right? But we can see tail fail to the upside, right? So tail failed up. But basically, when we look at that, right, what does it mean, right? Well, everybody's bullish on a hammer, right, until it breaks down, right? At which point, if you go long on a hammer, where's your stop? At the bottom of the hammer. So when those stops get covered, right, what happens? It drops down. And I remember this one very potently because the gap got filled on that week. So that was very, very interesting, right? Okay, and so we can look at it. We can see these all over the place, right? We see them on the daily, and we can start to, kind of, get a feel for what's going on here. So, and the shorter the time frame, it just depends on your levels and the key, levels of support and resistance that you go to before we get to it, right? So here was very interesting, right? So we had a hammer here, which ended up being part of this upward trend line, right? We got a pretty big move up off of that. This is on the SPX, right? So this hammer here was there at 3,007, right, all the way up to 3,022. So, on the daily time frame, that's actually pretty big if you can catch that movement. Here, and we'll take a look. So here's a hammer here off the cloud, right? So we can see them off of key levels, right? You can get more powerful, and the more you see that on the lower time frames, the better, right? So one of the things I like to see a lot too on the 60-minute time frame is a hammer, especially at the open, right? We've seen this before. Several times, like Roku, when when they had a downgrade, right? And we could start to see some movement off of those, right, on the hourly time frame. I mean, this pretty close, it's a very, very thick hammerhead, right, but it kind of went up, kind of got its movement to the upside there. So when we see these, right, we need to at least take notice, right, to kind of see what's happening, right? Even here, this red hammer turned out to be, a bullish reversal on Friday. Okay, so that kind of covers that, right? Basically, this is where we're at on the daily chart, right? We're reaching the support zone, so we'll see if that continues to hold. And a lot of times too, what we like to see, and it's hard to see on SPX, but we like to see volume come in if it's going to be on the downside, right? So we see this sometimes. So if we go to SPY, I think Netflix even did this recently. Yeah, so we had a pretty big move down on Friday. Right, so a big push right here, and then we had increasing volume on this hammer, which gave a little bit of a move up. Now it was a red hammer, right? But still, the bulls were still in control. And once it broke to the upside, we look at that price action for clues. Right, now here was an interesting hammer on Netflix, right? So this was off of this upward trend line here from the prior day, right? And then what happened? It couldn't break out, right? So this is more hanging manish. So we had an inside bar right here, and once that inside bar broke down, it triggered the tail fail down, right? So these are all price action clues that can help us intraday, right? Okay, and then of course we go to the 5-minute time frame, right? And we could see, how it behaves at certain levels, right? So this is also very important, right? So what I'd like to show here is I'm actually going to jump to SPY to see what kind of volume came in on that hammer, okay? Right, because it's probably very similar. Yeah, so very, very similar here. So here you can see on the 5-minute time frame, right, we had a big push down, right, and then volume started to come in on this green hammer bar, right, and then it broke to the upside, and look at what it had right there. So you could see the difference in volume here. We had low volume, and then we had increasing volume as the bulls started to take over off of this move, right, and then they transferred it back up, right. Here you can see this hammer here, right, failed to break to the upside, and once that broke to the downside, it eventually kind of stayed within range, right, and then kind of worked its way down. Just have to be careful on, things like this where it just kind of ticks up a little bit. I usually like to see the bid get like, a few cents above, where the hammer top is, not just the ask, right, where somebody's just kind of marketing in and creating an upper wick, right, an upper shadow. So it's very, very important stuff. And one of the real key things too to see is, what else is happening around those time frames. So if we go back to SPX, right, we could look at where that hammer is and evaluate the the time frame, right? So these are the levels that we provide to our subscribers before before the market open, right? And so here we have a weekly support level right here. So that is also very key, and the price behavior around these levels is very important, right? So when we see that we've come down to a key level and then we put a bottom shadow in under it, right? And so ultimately that's really what we're talking about this week, and we're really going to be kind of talking about is that it's these lower shadows and the consistency, and the shadows around key levels, which are really, really important. And so one of the things we like to see too is a bullish move, through a level or through maybe the cloud or something like that, that can kind of show us that, yeah, there's going to get some movement up. Like just for example here, right, we had a hammer here, right? It was, kind of coming down and all that stuff, but did it touch a level? No. And was it below a level? Yes. But to trade above this is very, very risky, right? Because it's trading into a level and it's also trading into basically the downtrend line, right? So that's trading into a lot of resistance right there. So sometimes, even though it did get follow through on this hammer, it didn't get massive follow through because it's kind of floating in space, right? And there was a lot of resistance above. So some of these sometimes do not make sense to do. Right? And so that was the other kind of thing I wanted to mention too here. You can see kind of ticked above it as well. But we want that bid, right? Not just the ask to be like over the hammer. We don't want to force the move. We want to jump on the move, right? We want to ride the wave up on those. So that's very, very important for that type of price action. So yeah, so that was good. So we basically, one thing I did want to mention, and we covered this in the newsletter this weekend for subscribers, but something really, really special happened with Tesla this week, right? And I wanted to dedicate a special video to it previously, but I was like, no, everybody's talking about it, maybe. So anyway, so Tesla the other day put in a big hammer right here, right? See that? I mean, this is just very, very bullish, right? And so what we did this weekend is we showed in the newsletter very, very important stuff, right? When all these time frames start to come together, how important it is, right? And just real quick, just to show you a few time frames right here. So we had the daily, right? So this was that hammer move to the upside. And if I show right here these levels, right, you can see I even put right here important level. That's the hammer high, right? That's where we can get a momentum move up. But you can see also here is I wrote a double inside 60 breakout level. So anybody who caught this, caught me chatting about this on Twitter this week, right? This is a very, very important level. And so let me actually convert this here so you can see the inside bars. Make that yellow. Okay, and very, very powerful stuff, right? So right here, you can see we had a double inside 60, right? And those can cause powerful moves. So watch, if I show you these levels right here, you can see this double inside 60, this second 60-minute bar held that important level, which means momentum was building, right, in this compression range. And once it broke out of that double inside 60, we had not only the daily level, the daily hammer, breaking out, but we also have this double inside 60 triggering it. That's why it's important to look at other time frames to see what else is triggering, and sometimes that can give a clue as to whether or not a hammer is going to move right to the upside. Right? Good stuff. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about this evening. So I hope you guys found that helpful. At this point, if anybody has any questions or chart requests, please feel free to play those in the chat window. We'll get through as many as possible. Try to wrap up by 10:30 so everybody can get a good night's sleep and we can have an awesome week this week. Just remember, again, tomorrow is the last day of September, so we'll see what they do. Right? Futures are up 10 points right now. Not surprised because apparently the Baidu news, right, and the Chinese stocks getting delisted was debunked by the Treasury Department, right? So. So very, very important stuff here, right? So this actually could be, show some bullish behavior tomorrow. So we may see, some movement tomorrow, certainly in possibly in the Chinese name. So anyway, a few stuff here. So one of the chart requests I have here is comes in from Shirley. She emailed that in to me. So we'll kind of take a look at those real quick. Good. Yeah. So Shirley wants to take a look at AGN. So let's pull that up here. Now, AGN, this is one, you sent me a bunch today, so this is one of the ones I kind of wanted to mention. So just be careful with this, right? So it looks bullish right here, right? You look at that, it's like, oh, wow, look at how much it's moved. But really, kind of in the grand scheme of things, it's been very, very flat here because this was acquisition news, right? So it gapped up on acquisition news. We actually had a trade of the week, which was AGN on this, and some members profited incredibly from this setup, right? We had an inside bar right here, lower shadow, and then that just triggered up the next day incredibly. Anyway, on acquisition news, you can see we're still basically within the range of this first bar, right, after the acquisition news right here. So I'd be very, very careful of trading this stock unless you're like basically just trying to day trade. I mean, you're still in the range of that gap up level. So chances are, right, this chops around for a very long time until the deal is closed, right? So just be careful with that. So that's why I wanted to bring that up there. TUR, even though it did have a nice green day. TUR, interesting. So you got the Turkey ETF, right? So this is kind of one of the things we're going to talk about this week. So this put an upper shadow, right? This is an inverted hammer right here. So for the most part, this actually has bearish implications, right? So be careful with this, right? Now it did gap above this, but it couldn't get any more movement up top. Right now it is big volume over the upper Bollinger Band, right? So just be careful with that. Now RSI isn't quite overbought here, but just be careful with that topping tail, right? So what that does do is show us kind of where the trend is going. If we go down here, you can see here to here, right? So it could be a little bit of a bump, right, kind of going on right there. So just be careful with that, right? So if it breaks down below this trend line, it might give a move to this trend line and then possibly down to the cloud. So that's another one to kind of be careful with. In fact, everything kind of need to be careful with these days. So now Deere has been interesting as well. So it had a little minor bumping run going, but for the most part, from here to here, this shows this recent upward trend line after the recent down move, right? So we had a little breakout of the cloud, and we have some consolidation here. So surely I think this is good as long as it holds this trend line right here. If it can hold that, and we can get a bullish close over these levels with some volume, we might see a little push up. Just be careful. No, you're good. We're already went ex dividend. So see if you get a bullish close there, and it might make a push to those recent highs. Drua was another one. I just did that because it looked really interesting. So Dominion Energy, this is just Dominion Energy Inc. BDS USD. So just be careful. This you could also just trade Dominion. But here we go. So this is this to this. So yeah. So generally bullish, but if it closed bearishly below Friday's low, just watch out for that. And then AME. Amatec, cool. So it goes here. Yeah, that is good. Sure, that is bullish until proven otherwise on that one. So looking good. And then we got another one from Gia. We've got cost. This is another request too, so I just want to make sure I get these so I don't forget them. So cost is looking really interesting, right? So we've been tracking this one. It does have earnings coming up very, very soon. So it has earnings this week. We were hoping for an earnings run, right? But we didn't quite get it, right? Because the market was generally pretty weak, but it hasn't broken down either. So what we are seeing is it sort of a, let me see, the low here was 284.40 and the low here was 284.71. So we had a little bit of a low here, so we have this, right? So a bullish close over Friday's high, right, could give maybe a 1 or 2 day earnings one, but just be careful, right? Because premium is starting to get pretty high, right? So even the weeklies, right? Right, I mean, we're talking about $5 on at the monies for Costco, right? That's kind of expensive. So for me, I'm just going to wait until after earnings and trade the 15 orbs on that after the IV crush, right? And we'll look for a trade off of that. Okay, and then Netflix. Certainly, we are definitely all eyes on Netflix, right? It has been downtrending for a long time, right? And let me see, since even before earnings. Okay, you can see this downtrend line here. So it's still respecting that. It is starting to show an inverted bump and run here. So you can see this the bump down. It's trying to get above it, but it's having trouble closing bullishly with volume above any of these pivots here. So we will keep an eye on it. So tomorrow, if it does close above that, there is a shot for this to move. Even up to this trend line is still pretty good. That still could be a 10-point swing. So we're definitely keeping an eye on it. We have closing gaps above, so that could be interesting. But my guess is that even if it does break out there, we're not going to see too much more follow through, as it'll probably respect the trend line, and we'll look for another reversal until we get to earnings to see what they have in store for that. I don't know how they're going to say that they had a major beat on earnings, but we'll see. They could have something up their sleeve. Good stuff. Dustin, what's going on? Yo. MPC, let's take a look. So yeah, this is doing well for you. A couple great moves on this, even with oil, kind of going down this week, right? MPC has held up fantastically. So great job on catching this one. Big move up. I mean, the last move down here, right, was to here. Pivot, right? So you did have a bullish close here, which eventually worked its way up, over a couple of weeks, and then another sideways move, and then up. So it seems to like to follow that type of move. But this is, I think, worth keeping an eye on at this point, right? Because the rest of oil, for instance, has been struggling, right, since the Saudi Arabia stuff. But we see like lower shadow, lower shadow, lower shadow, all at this downward trend line. So it's very, very important. It's trying to hold this line right here, and it's also holding the cloud. But if CL starts to take a move down, keep an eye on MPC. In fact, I'm going to add this to the watch list here too, because I think it is starting to get a little bit extended there, but doesn't mean it can't keep going. All right, let's take a look. CGC. Yeah, So Canopy Growth. This is a great example we wrote about in the newsletter recently. How it's been holding trend, right? And so this has been holding trend for a long time, right? Remember, the trend is our friend, and we want to trade in the direction of it when we can, right? So when it finally came back to the trend line, and we got some bearish indications on the shorter-term time frames, right? We were able to see a fantastic move to the downside, and that was great. And so right now, it is failing to break out of even this inverted bump line, right, to get up there. So we'll see it has a minor pivot here. If it can close over basically 25 and a quarter, bullishly, we might see another push up to this trend line. Then we'll have to see how it handles that. Lots of bearish cloud above too. So for the most part, I would look for opportunities, for short setups intraday. And then Disney. Let's take a look at Diz. Okay, so Diz too is downtrending. I know this looks really incredibly busy right here with the Bollinger Bands and everything. In fact, I can remove the Bollinger Bands here. There we go. And let me remove some of these lines as well. Okay. Here. I like having the cloud up there because it does give good perspective. But in general, right, so we have a couple things. So we had a fresh low right here. So what that did with this is move the macro trend line. Okay, so there's your low. So now multiple macro trend lines are all downtrending, right? So what we see here is like 3 bumps, right, off of this, and it is continuing down. So one of the things obviously to be concerned about is this gap down here, okay? So the next level gap support is at the low here, so that's at 126.36. So that is an area to look for some consolidation if the bulls want to defend this gap. If they do, then we'll see how it handles this trend line. We'll see how it handles this trend line and this one, right? If it doesn't, then we have to be really careful, and the trend is down right now, so we have to kind of keep that in mind here, at least this short-term trend, right? And even the long-term trend has already shifted. So definitely worth keeping an eye on that way. Good stuff. MicroTrader, what's happening? Good to see you. Sarah, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. Sai, what's going on? AYX? Yeah, let's take a look. AYX. Ooh. Okay, yeah. So we looked at this recently, right? And a few times, right? But we had a big consolidation zone, right? And then we had the channel moving up, right? And then once it broke out of this channel, it started to get a little bit ugly, right? And so what we've been calling for is a potential ABC pattern, right? Because usually a channel represents, especially a long channel, represents an impulsive wave, so typically a wave 3, right? So a corrective wave always comes in the form of an ABC. It just depends how complex it is, right? So at this point, we had a sharp move down, so that looked like possibly even a wave 1, 2. We might be working on a wave 3, 4, 5. This could be very, very sharp down. I wouldn't expect it to move past here, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it, right? This could be a zigzag in the works. If it is zigzagging down, then we would expect another ABC up for wave B, and then another sharp move down on wave C. So at this point, I would just wait for it to pivot. What we can do now is just kind of track it this way. Here's your low. There's this. And the trend line will help tell us if it's done, right? So over the next couple of days, we'll look for a minor pivot here, then a bullish close, and then we'll see if it can work its way up, wave B up. If it does, right, then once that's complete, right, it should not be able to, it should not reach above this 147.79 based on the zigzag rules, right, and it should give another sharp move back down. Something to keep an eye on. Good. And Okta. I like the AY. Does AYX have any options on it? It does. This is a fun one to watch. Yeah, it does. Not a lot of. The spreads are a little kind of ugly here. But if you catch it, yeah, I like this AYX. I'm going to add that to our watch list too. That looks good. Looks fun to watch. We've been looking at it enough. It's starting to look interesting. Good. And Okta, for sure. This has definitely been on the watch list here. Coda, Okta. All right, so Okta 2 has been working its way up has been consolidating here. So we have a fresh downward trend line here. So we're going to see how it handles this line, right? If it can handle it, it gives a bullish close, right? We might be able to get a swing to the cloud and a move back up. So it is holding, some support levels from the past. So we'll see if that can continue as well. Good. Doc Admin, what's happening? Pan W. Let's take a look. Yeah, so Pan W has been very, very interesting, right? So here's an example of a channel up, right? This is more of like a reversal move, but it was channeling up, right? Kind of back down. This is really, really tough right here, right? These candles have been very, very compressed for a while. It makes it very challenging to kind of see. I mean, a couple of things we could do is, we could look at a possible triangle type situation here. So, it is holding that, right? And this. So we could kind of look at it that way and see if it breaks out of this triangle one way or the other. what it could do, but it's very, very consolidating in here. So I'll just kind of wait for direction on that one. If it did close below this, right, and then gave another bearish close below that, we could possibly see some new lows on it. Good. VMW. Not VWM, VMW. Okay, cool. Yeah, wow, this price level is very, very key right here. It held those pivots there. Even after earnings, we were kind of looking at that. So this was a recent trend line we looked at and couldn't break through. Let me activate this, move this to these fresh lows. So it did follow a trend here. It tried breaking above this line here on this candle with volume and has been drifting down a little bit. So we really have to see how this wants to behave. This seems very, very tricky to me. It had a couple minor pivots and a bearish close right here. So at this point, it is looking bearish and it is following the cloud, right? So this probably was a little challenging here for a swing, right? Because it was maybe all going by fives. But I would just watch right here and see if it continues to work its way down. Because at this point, it is kind of choppy, but also on the bearish side of things. Macro wise, even here, right? That's kind of your macro trend right there. So any of these opportunities you can get to move toward a higher macro trend like this and then trade to the other side is possible. So this has a shot at getting back down to 130. And those 130 puts, if it's got the monthlies, 130s are 80 cents here on the October 18th, right? And 40 cents there. Just kind of interesting just to see what it would do if it got there. I think we should take a look at this one too. 1 second. I'm gonna add that to the watch list too. That'll be a fun one to keep an eye on. Good. And then MDB. Wow, still bearish, right? Here's the recent trend. New push down. I'd like to see it have a new low just to have a little more consolidation because it has a way to go to get to close back above that. I'd like to see it get a little bit lower, consolidate a little bit more, and then give us a reversal. It does have a gap down here, right, somewhere around this 107 area, so just keep that in mind. Good. Seneca, if you get to it. Huya, Baba, Baidu, and MU. Good ones. And the JD you mentioned earlier too is good. So you have Huya. Okay, these Chinese stocks got crushed the other day on Friday on that news that there's a chance that they would be delisted from the U.S. stock exchanges. Very, very interesting to see how they're going to behave tomorrow. If the market is kind of stays strong like this all night, I wouldn't be surprised if they gapped up significantly. But this was very dangerous to put on a contrarian trade on these, right? So to have that news come out and say it wasn't true, right, is really, really gambling to say that's going to happen. So, but you also have to be careful going short on these too, because anything could happen over the weekend, right? So something to look at there. So there's Huya, right? We had a minor pivot right here. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on it. If it does close bearishly below this low, right, we could see that kind of work its way back down. And then we have Baba. Very, very similar. Closed strong below this minor pivot right here. To me, that is a signal to short, especially with this volume, right? So we'll see how that holds. If it breaks down below Friday's low, it could really push, right? So if more negative news comes out, tomorrow should be very, very interesting for like news in the morning and tweets. Okay, Baidu's been a little bit different, right? So Baidu, right, obviously has been downtrending for a while here, right? So we talked about the spike in ledge the other day. This got to move down, but this has been downtrending for a while. And so at this point, right, so we can kind of see here, right, we actually gave this as a short idea. A member had mentioned this, and some folks in the room made a lot of money off of this candle right here. And then we had a 180 reversal the next day. Obviously taking profit on a gap fill like that, right? And then 180 reversal, gap up, and then back down below the cloud. So this one, I think of all of them as the most complicated setup. So I'd just kind of wait and see what it does. Now, if it closes, bullishly over this right here, then we might see another move to the upside on Baidu. And then MU, let's take a look. Whew. MU got crushed earnings, right? So apparently their earnings were good, but their guidance was bad or whatever the case was, and so that kept it down. So this is definitely going to be worth watching over the next couple of days. It did hold, it is in the cloud right now, and it is at some major kind of like levels, a lot of congestion in here. So we'll see how it handles that, right? So we'll kind of keep an eye on it for the next few days, and hopefully it gives us like a trend line that we can work with. I'm hoping for a couple more lows on it, right? let's see where the next gap is on this thing. There's a closing gap down here and the big opening gap down here. So we'll keep an eye on that, both directions for sure. Good. MTN, can I get into the bid ask wick with one of our future lessons? Yeah, absolutely. But just to kind of touch on it, let's just look at the ES right now, okay? And let's go to a shorter time on it, because this is trading live right now, right? Okay, so let's just see the 5-minute chart and see what's going on. So for me, right, what I would want to see if I were to get bullish on, just say like hypothetically here, if I considered this a minor pivot, right? So what I would really want to see is if this thing were really going to go, is I would want to see a bid over the high of this level, maybe even by a few cents, right? Now, granted, the futures move a little bit differently, but if we go to the level 2 right here, right, we can see they go in like 25-cent increments. So, I would probably want to see like 25 cents above this on the bid, or maybe even 50 cents. It's tough. I don't really trade futures that much, but the idea is that you have the bid above it, which if you have the ask right here above this line, right, but the bid is still below it, right? You can still, smash, take the ask on it, right? And then it, pushes itself up a little bit and gives that upper shadow. But unless that bid, right, unless there's like other buyers that, that are starting to push up, right, that they're showing demand at those levels, then you have to be really, really careful taking an entry on that. Right, you want to see that bid get above the level that you're focusing on. Otherwise, it's kind of like smoke and mirrors, right? So just have to be careful with that. And that's a lot of time where upper shadows come from, right? It's people marketing in positions, right? And the reason I know this is because I've made plenty of upper shadows in my trading. Or I'm like, oh, hey, see that hammer? Or see that shooting star? I did that, right? I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but anyway, and how it happens is you mark it in. Right, the ask is way up here, but the bid is still down here. You mark it in, and no one else is following along, meaning the bid is still way down here, and then you're stuck, and you're like, okay, and then the candle starts to move down, the price starts to move down. You're like, that's it, I'm out, and then you mark it out, and then you hit the bid, right, with it, and then you're done, right? So that's where those upper shadows come from. So be careful with that. Unless that bid gets above your pivot, right, it's not worth taking. So that's kind of hopefully that kind of gives a little clarity to that. And then, where to find the info in real time during, and then with the day with options, exactly. Find info in real time during the day with it. And so, MTN, so that's exactly it, right? So here you can see I've got I can pull up the level 2, right, on whatever chart I'm looking at. But you can also go to time and sales too up here if you have Thinkorswim, right? And it'll show you, who's buying what where, right? And if you really want to, you can pull up Active Trader right here, and that shows you, what kind of volume there is at these certain levels. Obviously, you could pull a volume profile as well, but you could show how big the asks are above, right? If you're showing big levels, right now they play games and all that stuff, but if they show big asks up here, it's like maybe I want to go long, right? Because there's a lot of sellers up there; they're ready to push me back down, right? So that can really help, right? And then the Thinkorswim DOM, right? The depth of market, which is what this is right here, right, is good. But it's not great because it doesn't hold historical values very well. But it's still interesting. It's still pretty good. TradeStation has a pretty good one. But anyway, so those are a couple different ways that you can look at it. Oh, we'll click the chart back up there. Okay, good. And then with options, basically it's the same thing, right? With Thinkorswim, you pull up the option chart, right? You can go here, of course, to the trade. Oh, let me pull up something that'll pull up. So let's say like Netflix. Right, and you can see so much information right in this area of real-time stuff. Obviously, you can see like the current levels, right, the volume, the open interest, right, and then you can also see the bid and the ask, right. You can customize this, right, to make it however you want to show your bid. So I always like to see what the bid is like in the ask, right, and then there's other really cool stuff too that you can see as well, right. You could look at the option statistics, but you could also see time and sales here too, and you can pull up the same thing on the option chart. But here, I could see exactly what they're doing, right, and on what exchanges they're doing, right. How many they bought, right, were they calls, were they puts, right, things like that. And then the other thing you can do to help with options is actually pull up the option chart itself, which you can do multiple ways. But one is just like right click here, and then you could just copy that, hit copy that, and then you could paste it onto your chart. Right, and then you can actually look at the options themselves, and you can see the time and sales on the options. You can see, I actually never pulled up Active Trader, but yeah, you can see that too, which is really, really cool to see how many people are sitting where with their options. And I need to start doing that this week. That's really cool. I never thought about doing that on the option chart. But I've done the time and sales, but not the Active Trader. That's great. Yeah, you can see like who's sitting where, right? It's like, oh, I got a put up here, or whatever. My stop is up here, right? Hopefully nobody goes after it, right? And you can see it going up there. Once it, a lot of times if people go, if the algos go stop hunting, they grab that and then come back down. We've all been there, right? We put our stop right there and there. It's like, oh no, they just grabbed my stop and left. So it helps, right? If you can see the volume and all that stuff. So I'm going to explore that a little bit more. That's pretty cool. But yeah, so those are different things that you can do as well. Hopefully you found that helpful. Robin, good evening. Session, what's happening? CLX, let's take a look. CLX. Ooh, that does look good. Clorox, cool. All right, that's an old trend line right there. But let's take a look at this fresh one that we have here. Low. Oh, yeah. That's good enough for me. That's pretty close. Hold on. Here. There, golly, that's really, really close. It might take a couple days, but I like that hammer, right? But it's coming right into this trend line right here. So just be careful with that. I'm actually going to remove that. It's old. We'll look for a minor pivot. Watch this over the next couple of days. This is going to be very, very interesting too. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. And I'll try to do a. I like that. Try to maybe like check out the bar chart too to see if those levels are accurate. Sometimes on the candles it can get really, really close. ADP. Whew, ADP was trying, wasn't it? Look at that, down here. Right, I did put a minor pivot here, but you got some cloud right there. I mean, if anything, could have looked at from here to this level. These get really tight. That's why I don't like these sometimes. But right here, right, and then once you had a bullish close over that, could have did a little swing on that long, right, for a quick overnight trade on ADP. ADP is a little tricky. I've traded it before. It's one of the ones I've only seen that had like a quintuple inside day or something. Then it didn't even move off of it. AT&T is interesting right here. So it has this minor pivot is right here. So I'd look for a bullish close above that, basically 38 with some volume, and then see if it can work its way back up to the highs. ADSK. Yep. So I haven't looked at this one in a while, but there we go. There's this. There's your minor pivot. A little close below. It's getting really, really, really rough right here. So just kind of keep an eye on it. As it is continuing to put in these bearish bars. To me, I'd like to see like a little bit more bearish, right? Maybe like a little shooting star with some volume, and then we could see possible move down. It's going to be tough to catch if it does do it though, but it is worth watching. DLTR. Oh wow, that really is moving. Here's that's the kind of the macro trend right here. Moved a lot since then, huh? So that's that, and then basically look for like a bump, a good bump type move right here to try to trade off of. There's your high. There's this. So watch these minor pivots right here. If we did close bearishly below those, your first target is maybe that 108 level. But if it broke down below that, it could be a possible cloud mover. But Dashi has been very, very strong. Good. Harvey, how are you, my friend? Hope you had a great weekend. Seneca, and then JD. Let's take a look. Yeah, so JD got slammed. Let's see. There was a high right there, so that's tricky. Generally, I would just say watch this and see how it handles it. Right? Maybe some more lows. It still has a little gap to fill below it, too. But yeah, they flushed that one, too. Goodness gracious. Thomas, what's happening? Target, let's take a look. Target. It's just been very bullish up here. I mean, in general, here's your trend, since the since earnings. So just see how it handles like, Thursday's low. If it gets bearish below there, it might get a little push down to the cloud. And then Starbucks, absolutely. So Starbucks has been bearish, right? But we're looking to buy the drip on this one. So again, but the trend is down until proven otherwise. So we'll see how it handles this trend line if it gets back up there, right? And if it's bearish, then maybe we'll look for some short setups because we have a little gap down here, a little gap down here. So so we'll see how it handles that. Eventually, it's going to work its way back up again. We just need to continue to track it with this trend line here. So that's good. And then ATVI. Yeah, we talked about this, I believe, the other day, and it did get its move down. I do like it bearishly, and I think I tweeted this out to the group that this looked very interesting short. It has a gap below and a gap below, so this is a very very bearish candle. It was big, so that was one of the reasons I didn't get into it right here, just in case it holds that gap support. But if it does break down any farther, it might start to work on that gap there. It might kind of come down to the cloud, so it's looking a little bearish right here. Eric, what's happening? Apple, absolutely. Yes, to members, I've stopped analyzing Apple on a daily basis, well, except for looking for swing ideas. But in general, in terms of day trading it, it's just I am done with it. It has just been so obnoxious with its candles. I'm just like, okay, that's enough. Okay, it has been holding this trend very very well. Right, see it tagged here, 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 and here. Right, so it's just, to me at this point it looks like it's kind of moving sideways. And trust me, intraday it has felt like it. But yeah, we'll continue to monitor this and see how it handles these levels, right? So this is kind of the key trend line just to watch right here. It did have a little bit of a bump trend line right here. So basically any bearish close, in these areas here could give a little move to the cloud, and the cloud is a little bit thin there, so something to also watch. Mukshit Ananda, how's it going? Microsoft and Twitter, sure. I think it's interesting that you put those together. Wouldn't it be cool if Microsoft bought Twitter one of these days? They bought LinkedIn. Don't think it's not possible. Let's see. I don't know why it always defaults to that. Oh yeah, because it's the default. But let's see. So here is the channel that it is still trying to hold here, and it is below it right now. So just have to kind of keep an eye on it here. It's just been really, really nasty in these areas. It's tough to put on any sort of swing position on Microsoft, but definitely worth watching intraday. And then Twitter. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of worked its way back down to the cloud here. So, we'll see how, it handles like kind of this trend line right here. See if it consolidates at the cloud, and then maybe eventually give a little breakout on that. But at this point, it's kind of hands off for me. MTN, cool. Glad that made sense, or glad that helped. Sean, what's happening? AOBC. Yep. So let's take a look here. That's a cool one. Down. Low. All right. Yeah, so this is a little bit tricky right here. That recent low off this point right here put a minor pivot here, so it's way below that minor pivot. So if trading with this, I would just be careful, right? Because you could have done a fresh one right here and kind of look at it like this. But again, that has to get over. I mean, it's a possible target to 7, but if you have a bullish close above Friday's close, then it might start to work its way up to that level. But that is a key resistance zone right there. Yep. Hey, Doc. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, TTD. Definitely. Always worth checking on TTD. And it should be on our list, but if it's not, it just needs to be. Yeah, it's on there. Okay. So yeah, so it's working its way. I mean, the trend is still down right since here. So we're just looking for it. Put a little pivot in on Friday, so we'll see if it can close above that. If not, then it's got, let's see, a little bit of support stuff right here, closing gap type thing. Then we have a big open gap down here, so we'll see how it handles that. Good. Mukshat Ananda, yeah, PEP and costs, yeah. So PEP needs a little pep, right? It's just kind of consolidating right here. We'll see how it handles like kind of this little light slope trend line right there. At this point, it's just kind of consolidating a little bit. Cost we looked at earlier, it's got earnings this week, so we'll see if we can get a little bullish close over this. But again, if anything, I would just look maybe a call spread or something like that to avoid the high premium. It's got a couple of gaps above, but again, for me, I'm just going to wait until after earnings and then look for the 15 orbs. Albert, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in, man. Guild, let's take a look. Oh my, Guild, look at this. Wow. That's really getting crushed there. So big trend line down. Here's a inverted bump right here for it. So we'll put that right there. So we see how it handles that level too. Red cloud above as well. So it's in a bunch of congestion zone too. So I would say, it might just chop around for a little bit, but who knows? Ninja, what's happening? Good evening. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in. Good. All right, guys. Well, thank you for everybody for your chart requests. If you're new here tonight, definitely click subscribe on YouTube, and appreciate you guys tuning in. Also, check out the links in the description. Right, if you come to us from YouTube, right, you can check us out on Twitter. You can also check us out at positivetrends.com, positive-trends.com. And yeah, really appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for the great chart requests, and hope everybody enjoyed talking a little bit about the hammer today. So, looking forward to talking to some more cool candles this week. So, enjoy the rest of your evening. And remember your risk first and stay safe so you can stay in the game. I'll talk to you guys soon.